We want to share our triumphs, our successes, and our failures with you to make you a better buyer of antiques and vintage if you're a collector, and a better seller of antiques and vintage if you're a reseller. And that is why we are expanding what we're doing with our What Sold video right now. We are going to talk to you about things that we sold online, go beyond just the usual listings, and we're also going to show you what other people did that maybe worked a little better than what we did, or what we did that worked the best. So first of all, we have this wonderful fascinator. This was the first item out of our August listings to sell. It went for $20, buy it now. It says 3 bids. I'm not really sure why, because unless the person bid against themselves, they did get it for the buy it now price. And it was such a cute piece. You can see there's just a little bit of damage in some of the netting there. And so that's why we didn't sell it for a higher price. But it's a beauty and a cutie, and they were very happy to get it. The second item we sold was the Burr Macintosh Monthly, and I really loved this. I'd never seen this piece before I got it. It turns out they published these for about 7 or 8 years, around 1900. They had interesting tip-ins like this wonderful Navajo piece. A tip-in is where they have a print that's inside a magazine, and they just glue it a little bit along the top line so that you can remove it and frame it. This magazine was intended for framing, and that's why you'll notice that it was bound with a string. And it had an advertisement in here for the Lord & Taylor fashion company, and it has the woman with the wonderful feather hat. Right after this, I found one of those feather hats. You'll see me wearing it on the thumbnail for a haul video I did out of that estate. This went to a collector of art-related pieces for $29 as a buy it now. Could we have gotten more? Well, perhaps so. Here is the Burr Macintosh that sold for the most during this time on eBay, and this one is wonderfully decorated on the front. She's so lovely. The colors are really bright, and it's Christmas. Christmas issues typically do sell for more than other issues because you have a double collectible. Christmas collectors will put these sorts of things out as well. And it had more color interior pictures and prints than mine. That's because by 1909, this publication was getting close to the end of its run. I also think that that might be a parish on the right there, and that would make it more interesting to people too. It's got Pall Mall cigarette advertising on the back, and you don't see a Surgeon General warning because those didn't come about until 1964. There it is. Merry Christmas, have a cigarette. This was a wonderful piece. This hair pick did sell for the most of any of the hair picks on eBay during this time. And it is sterling silver. You see the mark on the back. Now, this was one where the sunlight in sterling sometimes works really well. In this case, it worked well to show the amber jewels and the detail. It didn't really show the center stone very well. And then the overall, when you have a long, skinny item like this, it's a little difficult to get a good picture sometimes. The shaft of this was very white and the rest of it was very dark. Hard to get that contrast. So this might have done better under studio light for a picture, but it went for $90 almost on 8 bids. And I was pretty happy with that. It went to somebody who really enjoyed the style, and I sure did too. I thought it was a great piece. Now, in the middle of our listings, we sold this. I have a friend who helps me with my eBay, and between us, we have a lot of sports cards and a lot of non-sports cards listed. The non-sports cards have been doing really well lately, and so the Monkeys card here sold for $3.83. This is one of the originals. They are posed as some sort of a bunch of Western desperados. Look how young they look. They're all grandparents now, and those that are left. It is a really fun memory from the past, and that's why people like sports cards and non-sports cards. There were a lot of the non-sports cards for TV shows in the 60s. Now, this one sold for just under $4 plus shipping, but one of them sold for a lot more. Here is the Monkeys card that sold for the most. Now, this is kind of comparing apples to oranges. This one has Mickey Dolenz's signature, and that makes a big difference. Signed pieces absolutely are going to sell for a lot more. It is a real signature, and that is why the person went ahead and spent the money to send this to PSA, which is one of the card grading outfits, to have it certified and put in a slab. And what that means is it is sealed in this plastic. You can see both sides. it has the grading listed on it. I believe that's going to be on the back. So it says what number on a 10-point scale it is in terms of the quality, the condition, the way it was printed. Was it good color? Was it centered properly when it came off of the press? That is something that costs money. It probably costs $35 to get this certified. So they got $125 for it. As well they should, because of what it was. But they paid a little bit to get to that point. The next one of our listings to sell was this. It was the pocket mirror of the Bank of Viroqua in Wisconsin. And the picture really doesn't do it justice. Again, when you have a small item and you enlarge the picture like this is about twice the regular size. So every defect, every surface blemish, I took this picture in natural light. So it looks worse than it was. It actually was a nice piece in good condition. Viroqua is a town that is of some importance in the driftless region of Wisconsin, meaning that it's a very hilly area that was not actually affected by the glaciers in the last ice age. And so it's a little different than the rest of the state. It's also where Bruce Vig of the band Garbage and the famous grunge era record producer is from, and some other noteworthy people too. And I was surprised how many people who lived in that area were interested in this piece. So it went for $35 on 14 bids. And it actually went for the most of any of the bank advertising pocket mirrors being listed on eBay during this time. I was so glad to see this go to a new home. One of our regular viewers just loved this piece. This is another example where it looked a lot better. She sent a picture of it on her arm after she got it. And she was very pleased with it because she said, oh, I didn't think it was in as good condition as it is. Because the picture, again, this is about 3 or 4 times the actual size of the piece. And so every little scrape, every strange way that the light caught it, it makes it look discolored. It actually looks a lot worse than it really did in person. And so she was very pleased with how it looked when she got it. This is probably a little closer to a representation of how it looked, but I didn't make this the lead picture because it has a reflection of me taking the picture. It's hard to take pictures of reflective items. I've been trying to use natural sunlight this summer because you get more of the color, but natural sunlight, as we know, it also brings out some of our blemishes. And so this didn't look as good as it was, but she understood why it was interesting, and she paid $36 for it, which is near the top of what these are selling for recently. There's only one that went higher, which we'll show in a minute. But I was so pleased. On the left, you see the name Lois. My client, Lois, is 97 years old. She got this when she was 11, and it delighted her that somebody was still interested in it now. Here is the San Francisco World's Fair bracelet that sold for the most. It does have the logo, just like the cup that I sold had. But this one is a flex bracelet, and that means it will fit a larger person. The person who bought the one that I sold is very petite, and it fit her just right. But it was originally purchased by an 11-year-old who grew up to be a 5'11" woman. And for her, it was just too small now. And this piece is one that could be worn by more people. And I think that is the reason it sold for just $1 or $2 more than the one that we sold. This book I thought was very interesting. Now you can tell the front is pretty soiled on the dust jacket, but the interior was great. And it has these cool prints of these 1930s illustrations done by Ethelwyn Quayle, talking about the various gods that are represented in this book. This is by the Theosophists. And the Theosophists are not a religion per se, but they derive their philosophical teachings from various religions throughout history. And so this is a specific book with an interest to a specific group of people. The fact that it had a dirty dust jacket meant it didn't sell for as much as it could have, as you can see by this example here. Here is the version of the Kingdom of the Gods that sold for the most money. And look how much cleaner the dust jacket is. It's just a much more presentable piece. And that's why it sold for double the price of the one that I sold. On the other hand, I found mine for $2 on a bookshelf at an estate sale. So I was very happy with the amount that we got and happy that it went on to somebody who finds this group of topics very interesting. This is the 1976 version. which is 4 years after mine. It doesn't seem to matter much because the list of the 10 Sephora are still there, and there was one little tear on the inside of this one, but that was inconsequential to the buyer. Otherwise, the condition definitely was better than the one that I sold, so I could see why the difference in price. Condition really matters. This is a toy I always wanted as a child, and I'm so excited. One of the things I love about being in antiques and vintage is things that passed me by earlier in life, I get to play with now. And so I got to take it out of the box and put all the little accessories on it and roll it around on the floor while I was taking pictures. And did I get it out of my system? Well, there was a part of me that said maybe I ought to just keep this thing. But we went ahead and listed it. It sold at the last minute at the opening bid price for $99. And I think the collector who bought it, who's one of our regulars, made a pretty good decision to get it at the last moment, because typically these sell for a little bit more. Now, this one had been played with, and so it did have a little bit of wear. One of the tanks had been glued and put back on, and there were a few little chips, but really, if you take a look at this, it's in pretty great overall condition, but not entirely perfect. And of course, the people who are really serious about collecting toys, they want as close to perfect as you can get. So that is why another one of them actually sold for more. Here is the Texaco Fire Chief truck that sold for the most. Same company, AMF Wenback. The Buddy L's do sell for about $50 more, but the difference between this one and mine is no repairs on the back. No chips. This one is pretty much mint in box. And so that indeed does make it worth more than the one that I sold. Does it make it worth double the one that I sold? Well, I don't know. I think the person who bought mine got a pretty good deal, but I can see why this one sold for top dollar. These did very well, and these went higher than any other Tojo, anti-Tojo items. A friend of mine who's younger said, "Who is Tojo?" We have to remember that not everybody has a big background in history, but Tojo, of course, was the face of the enemy from Japan. The Emperor of Japan was basically told by his military, led by Tojo, that Japan would be taking over China, Manchuria, Korea, these other countries that they invaded, and was told they would be attacking Pearl Harbor. The emperor and his family really had lost power and control during the national era and were seen more as figureheads, and that is true to this day. And so Tojo really was the face of the enemy in Japan as opposed to the emperor of Japan, because we knew the emperor of Japan wasn't really the one making the decisions. The caricatures of Tojo were savage. He didn't look as bad as the drawings that we made of him, but he was a pretty evil person, and he ended up paying the ultimate price after a 1948 tribunal and was executed. These are original. You can tell by the oxidation. The condition was just so-so, but they're so difficult to find now because the war was over and people threw this stuff away. People don't want to hold on to the bad memories necessarily, unless they're history buffs, and then they find this interesting. And that's why this went for $81 the pair on 25 bids. And that was definitely more than any of the anti-Tojo pins selling on eBay at that time. I thought about selling them separately, but I think it was a good idea to put them together, partly because the condition was not perfect, and partly because I think the opportunity to add two to a collection was a big draw for a lot of people. This piece, I just loved it, and I'm so glad I made the decision not to repaint the wire. The person who got the piece said I am going to repaint it white, and that makes perfect sense. I thought about doing it myself, but I thought, you know, somebody is going to have to mask it off, and if I spray paint it, what if it doesn't look good? What if they would prefer to maybe take a little steel wool to it, remove some of the oxidation? So I sold it the way it was, and I think that was a good move because it went for $58 on 15 bids. This is acro agate. This is something that really took a great picture in sunlight, and it's just such a fun, happy color. And yellow is really back in style right now. We're seeing a lot of interest in yellows and purples, and even teal is starting to come back. A lot of these colors that were big in the late 1980s and in the late 1930s are making another round. And so it was good timing for this. You don't see the wire holders very often on these. This actually did go for more than any of the afro-agate little planters that there were. There were some bigger ones that were on at the same line that were hand painted and also were uranium glass that did go for more. But for this style, we got the most of anybody selling at the time. I thought this was a wonderful piece, and at first it started out kind of slow. One reason I do 10-day auctions is that, especially in the summer is a slower time online, and particularly on eBay. Particularly August, people are traveling, they're on vacation, they're not necessarily paying attention. And so I wanted this to have plenty of time to be seen. And in the end, it was, because we gave it a little extra time. There is the theory that August is a better time to do fixed price listings and leave them on there in case there isn't an August crowd. And in some cases, some of the items we sold might have gone for more if we'd done that. This one actually sold for right at the price that I thought it should, which was $46. It got 11 bids. A lot of the bidding was right at the last minute. But again, this was one where the sunlight really made a good picture because the sunlight got into all of the crevices in the carving, and so you really saw it the way it was. So I was very pleased that it went to somebody who is enjoying it now. This is the Bakelite Captain that sold for even more than the one that I sold. And you know what? I get it. I love the detail on this. The silvering, it's a little bit worn, but what a great Chinese red color, very popular in the 1930s. The silver really does bring out the highlights of the carving. Butterscotch is a good color, but red is definitely the most desirable of the Bakelite colors. The Roseville pine cone, I was so happy to get this piece and to be able to talk about it because of this picture here. This is the one where it shows that earlier floral patterns in Roseville did not all say USA on the bottom. And that's important to know. And they also sometimes were overglazed in the color of the glaze so that they didn't have a tan bottom. Also important to know because a lot of people have some confusion over Roseville marks. This one definitely is real. The person who got it absolutely understood that. It went for $100 on 5 bids. Now, I think if it had been a different color, as we'll see, it might have gone for more. I personally really like this piece in this color scheme because it really works with the pine cone and the branches. But there is another color that is maybe a brighter color for a lot of interiors that sells for even more. The other thing with this is that you see on the rim there is a slight glaze skip. And this is one where maybe the natural light didn't enhance it, because it makes it look like maybe there's a chip, and there definitely isn't, and I disclosed that, and the person who got the piece was thrilled because they said it's nicer than it looked. And that happens sometimes. So, you know, we do our best taking pictures, but sometimes other people do a better job, and we're going to show you an example of how that worked in their favor right now. Here's the color that seems to be selling the best right now in Roseville Pinecone, and it is the blue. They did green, they did blue, and they did the ochre, like the one I sold. Blue seems to be the most popular. It is a lovely color. It's restful for the eyes, and blue is the color that everyone from psychologists to interior designers say if you have a couple and they can't decide on a color to put in a room, pick blue, because blue is the color that the most people can resonate with and coexist with. So blue is good. This also sold during the time we were running our eBay listings. This wasn't one we listed specifically. It was one that was in our store. Our sports cards and books are in our store all the time on eBay. This one went for $1.53. This is Forgetful Fred. There was a series called the Don Russ Awesome All-Stars, and it was a comic series. It's a lot like the 60s era stuff by Big Daddy Roth and the other sort of gruesome-looking characters. But this was done in the 80s during the baseball card hype of that generation. And there are collectors of these now. But individually, they really don't sell for much more than this. Ours sold for about as much as any of them go for. Having said that, they still sell for more than most 1980s baseball cards, which were wildly overproduced. This was a wonderful thing that I got from Mark Jones in Idaho, and I'm so thankful that he sent it to me because it was a really fun piece to show. When I did the listing video, I put it right next to the Tojo pieces so people who are interested in war memorabilia saw it. It ended up that two different people ended up buying those lots, but this one went for $60 on 19 bids. And it is a Victory Liberty loan. This one actually, if you look at the bottom, is from New York City, and it was done right after World War II in order to help retire the war debt, because the last year or year and a half of the Second World War were quite inflationary, and the war debt really soared. I think it cost over $1 billion in 1940s dollars to end World War II, which is part of the reason the atomic bomb was dropped. They don't really talk about that part. They talk about being concerned about the invasion of Japan and whether we would lose 1 million soldiers, but they don't really talk about the fact that the war was starting to bankrupt the entire world. Half the world was blown to bits. The other half, everybody was loaning everybody money and ships. War is expensive and bad. There's just no way around it. And so it was very important to retire some of this, but people had great wages during the war, and so people were willing to loan the government money by buying these bonds. And this is a really nice piece. It was in really great condition, and I'll bet it looks good in the collector's home. And it went for the most of any of the Victory pennants for sale on eBay during this time frame. This little piece was so sweet. I didn't know what to expect. She went for $15.50 on 7 bids. She was from a very tiny town in Kansas, and I think that she might have sold for more if she had been from a bigger place and someone was collecting for nostalgia of that town. This town has dwindled to just a few hundred people, so I don't think there's a lot of people collecting Rolla, Kansas per se. It got nailed in the Dust Bowl shortly after this was made, and really that was the end of its progress. So it is just a dusty little farm town in the southwest corner of town, Kansas, but this lovely woman came from it, and she is now in a collector's home, and I just thought she was very sweet. This piece was another one that sold for the opening bid at the very last minute. So again, August, if you're a collector, August can be a great time to buy online because some interesting pieces like this one may go unnoticed, especially if they're rather specific like this. This is a Boeing cruise missile. I threw in a pad of paper from the desk of the engineer who had this in his estate, as well as one of the Boeing newsletters that talked about the cruise missiles. I think maybe the engineer did the little taping on the stem that made this stay put so that it didn't wobble around. Perhaps I should have taken that off. I don't think it really mattered in the end as far as the bidding. I think it's just such a specific piece. What we see with the Boeing desk models is that the ones that really sell for big money are the airplanes. When you get into the more obscure pieces, then it really depends what it is. And this is a fairly plain piece. And so I think $99 was a fair price for it. There was only one Boeing desk model that sold for more that was not an airplane, and it was this one here. It's a drone that was done by Boeing as a desk model that sold for the most money. They got $153 on 2 bids. So really, they only got one more bidder than I did. And that's all it takes with eBay is you really just need to get 2 people who are interested, actually true in any auction. Sotheby's, Christie's, all the way down. You just need 2. If you've only got 1, you're going to sell it for the opening price. If you've got 2, then you're going to find out how interested are the people really in this piece. One other deck sold for the same price as this one did for us. It went for $152.50 on 24 bids. These decks are very popular because they show all of these 1960s music greats. And that is the appeal. There's also a country music version by Heather Publications that sells for even more. Heather Publications did a number of these series in the early to mid 60s and then pretty much disappeared. And so you'll see prices of $150 and up on their things if it has to do with music. I think the graphics are great. The person who got it did have a little concern when they first got it. You can't really see it in the pictures, and I didn't think to show it, but when you put them together, the edge has sort of a dark old gold finish on it. And they were very concerned that that might be a reproduction because apparently some other retouched cards from some other series had come to them in their collection. And so they sent an email to me saying, I'm concerned that these might not be real or they may have been altered. And I assured them this came out of a 40-year-old collection and had been in that collection for that entire amount of time, and that there had been no alteration done. And they did a little more research and found out that that was indeed the case. So the sale stuck, which was great because it was a good sale. And if it had been something where they sent it back to me, I would have offered it to the next bidder because the next bidder was just $2 less. Walt Disney 1965 Disneyland Guide. Very fun, very sweet. I especially liked the graphics where they showed the different places in Disneyland, and I really enjoyed this page where they talked about Walt Disney's dream for the future. But it only went for $13.50 on 2 bids, and the last bid was last minute. Again, it might be the time of year. I think more people are at Disneyland than looking for Disneyland stuff this time of year. Also, there's a little stain in the right corner of the cover, and I think that may have affected it because we did see another one went for substantially more earlier in the summer in slightly better condition. Now, here's an example where the pictures were not better, but they got a lot more money for the piece, and that had to do with the condition of the piece. They got $36.50 for theirs, and I got $13.50 for mine, and the only difference was a little yellow spot on the cover of mine. So that just goes to show you it's not always just about having a better listing. It's about having a better collectible, and condition really, really matters to a lot of collectors. I get people who say, oh, you're so picky about condition and I'm willing to forgive, and that's great if that's your ethos and your style and you don't mind that, or you just want something inexpensive to fill a space in a collection, that's really cool. But if you are really intent on collecting top quality, you want something as perfect as possible. Now, we do sell books in our eBay store. There's always a listing of books. A lot of these are more contemporary. My friend who I work with on eBay is an editor, and he was sent many books over the course of his career, some of which he's read and are keeping, some of which he read and reviewed and are now for sale. And so he's got a ton of different topics, and I have a few books on there as well. This particular one, he had a run on baseball books this month. Several sold, and this is one of them. This one only went for $5, but some of them went for as much as $15 or $20. This one's on the old Pacific Coast League. One thing about selling books, of course, is if you are able to find things that are in season, well, this is the season to sell them because baseball season is at its peak right now. A lot of baseball sold, and he sold a number of baseball cards as well this last month. Now, here's an item that we put on eBay. It was in our haul video. You look at the picture and you think, that is such a terrible picture. Well, the person who contacted us wanted to buy it, and buying it through eBay was the easiest way for him. So we priced it a bit higher in order to cover the eBay fees, and we just took a quick picture, listed it. You notice no description, black brush 1940s. It doesn't even say what it is. You think, well, that is a terrible listing. But the point was to put it out where that customer could find it and buy it, and not to put it out there where everybody in the world would see it. And so that's how we handled that. So sometimes when you see a listing and you think, how did that sell? It's such a terrible listing. Well, it's because it's a private sale. So that does happen sometimes. Now, let's take a look at a few of the things that we listed that didn't sell, whether that was because of the item or something we did in the listing. The first one, we had 4 items that didn't sell last month on our listings, and one of them was the Fur Rendezvous buckle. This one I thought was really fun with the mountain goat. You know, it is not the right time of year. The Fur Rendezvous happens in February. It is a winter sporting event. It looks like it's a lot of fun. I'd love to go someday. It's not for this time of year. So it may be that that's part of the reason. It may be there's a little bit of wear on the high points that I'm noticing when I look at the picture. Although, again, I think that the natural light is making it look worse than it is. But there were some that did sell in this period of time. And we're going to show you how important a picture is by showing you the one that sold for more. Here's the one that sold for $22.50. And it is the same era, but it is a really, really neat graphic. And I think that the graphic may be what sold it. Also, the fact that this was the silver anniversary of Alaskan statehood in 1984 might be part of the appeal. So this one went for $22.50. So that shows me there is a customer for the Fur Rendezvous belt buckles, and I think they're really cool. It also shows me that if you collect this sort of thing, summertime's probably the time to buy. I put out Fact Magazine by Ralph Ginsburg. I have several of these for sale. I decided to only put out one. There is some yellowing. It may have looked worse than it was because the natural sunlight really brings out everything and it really amplifies the way things are. There is no hiding behind studio lighting. And I don't go through and AI this stuff or clean it up or try to make it look like something it isn't. I figure that if people are more happy with the item that they get than they were expecting from the pictures, that's actually a good thing and they will come back to me and want to buy other things. Whereas if you doctor up a picture, they may say, well, I don't want to deal with you anymore because I don't know whether I'm really getting what you're showing me. So I err on that side. I thought this was a really interesting publication. We are finding right now, though, a lot of people who used to collect counterculture stuff are aging out of the market, and younger people, I think, are a little turned off by politics right now. So we are not seeing the countercultural things selling like they were 5 or 7 years ago. Politics goes in cycles, and when this political cycle changes, or a new generation starts to have countercultural ambitions of their own, we may see more interest in the countercultural items of the past. I personally find them interesting. I did see one seller, only one, who managed to sell these magazines, and I'll show you how they did it. So this went for $50 Canadian as a group of 3, which is $35 US plus shipping. And I think that might be the way that I need to sell mine. I believe I have 9 or 10 of these. I could break them into lots of 3 or 4. I think perhaps the people who are collecting this stuff are reading it because the articles are really interesting. Ralph Ginsburg and his crew were investigative journalists, and they were not afraid to take on important politicians of the time, which actually ended up being his undoing. He also took on the medical establishment, and he was very willing to go deeper into a story and to find information that had not been brought to light before. And so I think that for somebody who is a student of these times, or who is looking for parallels between what was happening then and what's happening now, these would prove to be really interesting. And it may be that selling them as a group is going to be more of an attraction to that collector. This is another counterculture magazine that didn't sell, and it's in wonderful condition. These used to go for $30. They seem to be very slow right now. I think the graphics are really cool on this one, and I thought that that might be the appeal. So we had it up for $19.99 and didn't get any bids. And here's the middle class fantasies that did sell. They sold number 1 and 2 together for the same price that I was asking for just the one. And that tells you that the market is not great for these right now. There's number 1, there's number 2. I think the graphics are really fun in this, and it's a little less sort of shock value than a lot of the counterculture stuff was trying to be at that time. It's a little later in the countercultural era as well, 1976, as opposed to the late 60s, early 70s. And then this was the last piece that we listed that didn't go. I tried twice now to sell Bernard Leach pottery in the standard wear lines. The price is absolutely right. I had it at $79 with a buy it now in the $125 range. Those are absolutely numbers that should sell this piece. And it's great stuff, and it does sell. I'm wondering if the customer is maybe in England or Japan right now, because the heritage of these pieces is English and Japanese. Studio pottery has been a big seller of late, and this is such a seminal piece for studio pottery. I'm feeling like maybe I need to hold these back because they're housewares until we get into the fall and people are back in their homes and doing more things related to cooking and kitchen stuff, preparing for the holidays, that sort of thing. Just like I don't usually try to sell dinnerware this time of year, I think that maybe this was just misplaced in its time frame, because there is definitely a market for Bernard Leach, St. Ives pottery, and the pottery that his students made, particularly the artware. And here is an example of that right now. This is Michael Cardew, who was one of their more successful students. This was a jug that they made under the tutelage of Bernard Leach when he was teaching at St. Ives. And it's a really neat artware piece. And again, it's a pitcher. So it's not that different from what we just saw, but it is artware specifically because it has that detail. There is the signature on the bottom. You can see the way the bottoms are shaped with that interesting sort of off-center. It looks like ripples in a pond. If you can't find the Leach mark, which is not always as clear as that on the brown piece that I showed you that I had for sale, it was so heavily glazed over on the side you could barely read it. But these pieces do sell, and you see this one went for $200. So it may be a situation where I need to just list the Leach pottery at a fixed price and let it sit until it sells. And so that's our wrap up of what we sold on eBay over the last 30 days, including our regular listing that we put out to members and then the general public. And I hope you really enjoyed it. I know some of you purchased some of these items, and thank you so much. We do appreciate being able to send these things to people who really love them and want to collect them and preserve them for the future.
If you enjoyed this video, check out this one. Also, click thumbs up to like this video and check the description for information about our Patreon, our memberships. We've got a lot of different levels with different perks and bonus videos and early content. Also, please do check out our website, theantiquenomad.com, for appraisal help. And we'll see you again for more adventures in the antique and vintage community soon. Bye for now.